Hello guys, this is Harish Nagar and today I am going to talk about Toru Dutt. Guys, Toru Dutt was born in 1856 and she died in 1877. Now guys, you must be aware of the fact that Toru Dutt lived for a very short span of time, and in spite of her premature death, she was able to make a mark in the history of English literature in India. And it is also important to know that she wrote both in English as well as in French language, and she is one of the first Indian women to go abroad. Now guys, in 1870 she visited France and then she visited England along with her sister Aru. Now guys, we find that she mastered the French language in a short time during her stay in France, and she became so competent that she wrote original works in French language. Now since she was living in France for a period of time, we find that she was highly influenced by French Romanticism, French language and literature. But in spite of the fact that French language fascinated her, she was very much connected to India as well. And the poetry of Toru Dutt is notable for the feel of Indian life that it has been able to convey in a foreign language. So guys, she is able to convey the feel of Indian life in a foreign language. And also we find that she has interpreted Indian life before the entire Western world, and that is why she is known as the forerunner of the poetic renaissance in India. Now guys, we find that she converted to Christianity at one point in her life. Even after she converting to Christianity, after visiting Europe and after having English education, all these things could not blur her love for the India's ancient religion and mythology. And in almost all her works, you will find that she is continuously talking about what India is to her. Now guys, in this particular lecture, I shall be talking about two poetry collection of Toru Dutt, and then I will talk about three poems written by her. The first poetry collection is A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields. This was published in 1876 and it consists of a translation into English of French poetry. So she translated her French poems into English, and this particular work is a collection of her translation. Now the next work is Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan. This was published in 1882 and it was published as Ancient Ballads of Hindustan. So rather than using the entire title Ancient Ballads and Legend of Hindustan, she also published it as Ancient Ballad of Hindustan, and it is dedicated to her siblings Aru and Abju, and these poems are translation and adaptation from Sanskrit language. Remember guys, A Chef Gleaned in French Fields was translation of French poetry, and this is translation and adaptation from Sanskrit literature. And one more important thing is that Edmund Goose, who is a prominent writer, wrote an introductory memo for this work, in which he writes for Toru Dutt that she brought with her from Europe a store of knowledge that would have sufficient to make an English or French girl seem learned, but which in her case was simply miraculous. So basically he is trying to say that if the kind of knowledge that Toru Dutt had, if that kind of knowledge a English or French girl would have, then that girl could be tagged as being a very learned girl, very intelligent girl. But in Toru Dutt's case, she was a miracle because she was from India and she had no idea of the English culture, neither she had any idea of the French culture, and still she was able to have mastery over both these languages. Therefore, it is miraculous. So we have talked about this two poetry collection of Toru Dutt, namely A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields, published in 1876, and then Ancient Ballads and Legend of Hindustan, published in 1882. Now guys, we are going to look at the three poems written by Toru Dutt. The first poem is Ourshurina Tree. Casuarina is actually a kind of tree which you will see in the garden of certain people. So in this particular poem, she is describing this casuarina tree. Just like you have banyan tree, mango tree, similarly we have casuarina tree. And in this particular poem, she is describing that casuarina tree which grew in the country yard of her house in Bengal. So remember, she was from Bengal, and in the country yard of her house, Casuarina Tree was there, and it is autobiographical poem because she is talking about her childhood in this poem, and the poem begins when we find that she is describing the Casuarina tree, and we can feel how she is missing. She is pining for her native land because she is living abroad. So she was living in France when she was writing this poem, and she was missing India, and that is why she is talking about the tree, and she is trying to revive the memories of her childhood. Now guys, in the first part of the poem, we find that she is talking about the casuarina tree, and she described the tree saying that it looks like a huge python which is winding round and round with the rugged trunk. So there is this creeper branch which is moving round and round through the trunk of this casuarina tree. And this casuarina tree is looking as huge as python, and it feels as if its height is touching the summit of stars. Now after this, she talk about the creeper which is there or moving on the trunk of the tree, and she is saying that this creeper looks like a scarf, and the crimson crafter of flowers and bugs accompanied by the bird and swarms of bees, all these things are adding to the beauty of the tree. And Toru Dutt says that it is not because of the majestic appearance of the casuarina tree that it is dear to her heart and soul, but it is because she shared happy memories under this tree with her siblings, and she laments the death of her siblings. So she wrote this when both her siblings Aru and Abju, both of them died, and she lamenting the death of her siblings, and she is also remembering the happy moments when she spent with her siblings under the tree. Now Toru Dutt has brought out the theme of nature as something that shares feelings with humans, that lightens the burden on the heart, and the poem continues to show how tree can be so closely associated to childhood memories. And we also find that Toru Dutt is showing as the tree is also lamenting the death of her siblings. Just like we have the poem of Romantic Age who says that even the trees or the nature also lament death of a beloved person. If we talk about the poem Adonis, in which the entire nature is lamenting the death of a friend. Similarly, in this case, we find that even the tree is lamenting the death of her siblings. And even in France and Italy, where she is living currently, she can hear the lament of the tree. Now finally, towards the end of the poem, she immortalizes the tree, just like Wordsworth immortalized tree of Borrowdale, and she says that may love defend thee from oblivion's curse. Now guys, what is oblivion? Oblivion means forgetfulness. So she is basically saying that I am trying my best to express my wish that love should protect the tree against the curse of oblivion. That means the tree should be remembered out of love and not because it cannot be forgotten. So she is saying that I am trying to immortalize the tree in my poetry so that anybody who will be reading this poem will be reminded of the tree, and they will not be able to forget the tree for the rest of their life. So that was our Casuarina Tree written by Toru Dutt. And there was a question guys in UGC NET exam in November 2017. The question was, who is the author of the poem Our Casuarina Tree? And the author is Toru Dutt. Now guys, moving forward to the next work of Toru Dutt, which is Lakshman. Now as we know, Lakshman is a character from Ramayana. He was the younger brother of Ram and brother-in-law of Sita. Now this poem talk about the dialogue which happened between Sita and Lakshman. And if you have read Ramayana, then I am sure that you must be knowing about that scene in which Ram goes in order to search for the deer. And Ram tells Lakshman that make sure that Sita is protected. Don't leave her at any cost. And now suddenly Sita hears the voice of Ram, who is shouting for help, and Sita is very concerned about her husband's welfare. And she asks Lakshman that you should go and help his brother. So this conversation is going between them and both of them are trying to convince each other. Now guys, moving forward, finally we come on to the last work of Toru Dutt, which is another poem called Lotus. It is a patriarchal sonnet, and in this sonnet she is presenting lotus as the most beautiful of all flowers, especially as opposed to lily and rose. So basically the poem opens when we find that there is a god of love who asks the goddess Flora, and god of love asks from goddess Flora that you should pick up a flower which can become the unchallenged queen of flowers. So just like we have the king of fruits, which is mango, similarly the goddess love is asking goddess Flora to choose a flower which can become the queen of flowers. And goddess Flora says that lily and rose, both of them are beautiful, but then goddess Flora gives to the goddess love a lotus and tells that lotus is the most beautiful of all flowers, and therefore it stands as the long-standing queen or the unchallenged queen of the flowers as opposed to the rose and lily. So basically guys, she revolves the long-standing quarrel that happened between Rose and Lily, and she says that neither of you win because the unchallenged queen of flowers is Lotus. So that is the poem Lotus written by Toru Dutt. Now guys, in this particular lecture we have looked at two poetry collection and three poems. The two poetry collections are A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields, published in 1876. Next is Ancient Ballads and Legend of Hindustan, published in 1882, and the three poems are Ourshurina Tree, Lakshman and Lotus. So that's it for today's lecture. If you like my video, kindly share with your friends. Thank you guys.